When a quiet farmer resists a billionaire's plan to buy her land, she uncovers a battle for power, love, and legacy, along with a secret that could change everything. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching. From today, the morning dew clung to Rose Tilden's boots as she crossed the small pasture behind her cottage. In the dim light before sunrise, she could make out the shapes of her 3 Jersey cows waiting patiently by the barn door. They knew the routine as well as she did. "Good morning, ladies," she said softly, patting each one on the head. "Ready for another day." At 35, Rose had been doing this same morning ritual for so long that her body moved on autopilot. Fill the feed troughs, check the water, set up the milking stool, and get to work. By the time the sun peeked over the hills of Maple Hollow, she'd have all the milk she needed for the day's market. The cows, Buttercup, Daisy, and Clover, were more than just livestock to Rose. They were her partners in the small business that kept her afloat. Every squirt of milk that hit the metal bucket was a penny earned, and these days every penny mattered. "There you go, that's my girl," she murmured to Buttercup, the oldest of the 3. The cow gave a soft moo in response, as if thanking Rose for the gentle touch of her hands. Inside the cottage, Rose's mother was still asleep. These quiet morning hours were the only time Rose had to herself, a brief respite before the challenges of the day took over. As she finished milking, she glanced toward the cottage window where her mother's bedroom was. The curtains were still drawn. Good. A little more sleep would do her good. Martha Tilden had been the strongest woman Rose had ever known. But 2 years ago, when Rose's father passed away suddenly from a heart attack, something in Martha began to slip away too. At first, it was just forgetting small things, where she put her glasses, what day of the week it was. Now, there were days when she didn't recognize her own daughter. Rose carried the heavy milk buckets to the small processing shed behind the barn. Here, she filtered the milk and poured it into the glass bottles she'd scrubbed clean the night before. Each bottle got a handwritten label, "Tilden Family Farm Fresh Jersey Milk." She added the date with careful penmanship and placed the bottles in wooden crates lined with straw to keep them cool. By 6:30, Rose had loaded the crates into her old pickup truck. She checked on her mother, who was now awake and sitting in her rocking chair by the window. "I'm heading to the market, Mama," Rose said, kissing the top of her mother's head. "Mrs. Wilson will be here at 8 to stay with you." Martha looked up with cloudy eyes. "Don't forget to take lunch for your father. He works too hard in those fields." Rose's heart squeezed painfully in her chest. "I won't forget, Mama," she said softly. It was easier than correcting her. "I'll be back before you know it." The town market was already bustling when Rose arrived. Farmers and craftspeople were setting up their stalls along Main Street, greeting each other with the familiarity of people who'd known one another for generations. Rose's spot was at the corner, under the shade of a large maple tree. She'd been selling in the same spot since she was a teenager, helping her parents. Now it was just her, but everyone still knew the Tilden milk stand with its checkered gingham cloth covering a simple wooden table. "Morning, Rose," called Sam, who sold vegetables from the next stand over. "Got any of that buttermilk today? The wife's making biscuits." Rose smiled and pulled out a special bottle from one of her crates. "Saved it just for you, Sam. Tell Ida I said hello." This was how most of her mornings went. Friendly chats with regular customers, the clink of coins being dropped in her money box, the satisfaction of seeing her bottles go home with families who appreciated good, honest food. It wasn't much, but it was enough to pay the bills and keep her mother's medical care going. At exactly 7:45, just like clockwork, a black Range Rover pulled up at the edge of the market. Rose didn't need to look up to know who it was. She could feel the shift in the air as conversations paused and heads turned. Thatcher Wynne had arrived. He walked through the market with the confidence of a man who knew he belonged anywhere he chose to be. At 42, Thatcher was in his prime, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair just starting to grey at the temples. His clothes were simple but expensive. Dark jeans, a crisp button-up shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows, and leather boots that had probably cost more than Rose's monthly mortgage payment. People in Maple Hollow knew Thatcher as the man who owned most of the valley. His family had been land developers for generations, buying up farms and turning them into upscale housing communities, or commercial properties. The Wynn name was on half the buildings in town, including the new shopping center on the outskirts and the luxury resort by the lake. But for all his wealth and status, Thatcher came to the market every Tuesday and Thursday morning and walked straight to Rose's stand. "Good morning, Rose," he said, his voice warm and deep. "Mr. Wynn," she nodded, reaching for a bottle of milk without being asked. This had been their routine for months now. "Please, I've told you a dozen times to call me Thatcher," he said with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Rose handed him the bottle. "That'll be $3, Mr. Wynn." He chuckled and placed a $5 bill on the table. "Keep the change. And the weather looks good today, doesn't it? Not a cloud in the sky." "It does," Rose agreed, trying not to notice how blue his eyes were in the morning sunlight. "Thank you for your business." As he walked away, Rose couldn't help but wonder why a man like Thatcher Wynn bothered to come to the market twice a week for a single bottle of milk. He probably had people who could do his shopping for him. He certainly didn't need to make small talk with the local farmers. "He's sweet on you," Sam teased from his vegetable stand once Thatcher was out of earshot. Rose rolled her eyes. "Don't be ridiculous. Men like that don't look twice at women like me." "Then why does he keep coming back, Sam raised his eyebrows suggestively. "For the milk, obviously," Rose replied. But even as she said it, she wasn't entirely convinced. There were plenty of places to buy milk, even good milk. Why did he come to her? By noon, Rose had sold most of her stock. She packed up the remaining bottles, said goodbye to her fellow vendors, and headed home. She needed to check on her mother and get started on the afternoon chores. The cows would need milking again, and there were always repairs to be done around the small farm. When she pulled into her driveway, Rose was surprised to see an unfamiliar car parked outside her cottage. It was sleek and black with the logo of Wynn Development discreetly placed on the driver's door. A man in a suit stood on her porch, talking to Mrs. Wilson, who looked uncomfortable. Rose's stomach tightened as she stepped out of her truck. "Can I help you?" she asked, approaching the stranger. The man turned, all polished smile and expensive cologne. "Ms. Tilden, I'm James Morton, Senior Development Manager for Wynn Development." He held out a business card. "I was hoping to have a word with you about your property." Rose didn't take the card. "I'm not interested in selling, Mr. Morton. As I've told your company before." Morton's smile didn't waver. "I understand your attachment to the place, Ms. Tilden, but our offer has increased substantially since the last time. Mr. Wynn is very interested in completing his acquisition of this area." A cold feeling spread through Rose's chest. "Mr. Wynn, Thatcher Wynn, sent you here?" "Well, not directly," Morton replied smoothly. "But he's the CEO and this project has his full backing. The Meadowbrook development will be the crown jewel of Wynn properties in this region." Rose thought about Thatcher coming to her stand twice a week, making small talk about the weather, smiling at her like they shared some special connection, all while his company was plotting to take away her home. "Please leave," she said, her voice shaking slightly, "and tell Mr. Wynn that my answer is still no." Morton frowned. "Ms. Tilden, you should at least look at the offer. Your property is the last piece we need, and frankly, with your mother's condition—" "How do you know about my mother?" Rose demanded. Morton had the decency to look embarrassed. "We do our research, Ms. Tilden. We know this place must be a burden for you to maintain alone. The money from this sale could provide the best care for your mother and set you up for life. My mother belongs here with me on the land she's lived on her whole life," Rose said firmly. "Now please leave before I call Sheriff Davis and report you for trespassing." After Morton reluctantly left, Rose checked on her mother, who seemed thankfully unaware of the visitor. Mrs. Wilson gave Rose a sympathetic look as she gathered her things to leave. "Don't you worry about those corporate types," the older woman said, patting Rose's arm. "They've been trying to buy up everything for years, but some things aren't for sale. Right?" Rose nodded, but her mind was racing. How did they know about her mother's condition? And why was Thatcher Wynn suddenly so interested in her land after months of friendly visits? That night, after her mother was asleep, Rose sat at the kitchen table with her account book spread out before her. The farm was barely breaking even, the medical bills were piling up, and the cottage needed repairs she couldn't afford. But this was her home, the only home she'd ever known. the place where her father had taught her to milk cows and her mother had shown her how to make butter in the old wooden churn that still sat in the corner of the kitchen. Rose closed the books and looked out the window at the moonlit pasture where her 3 cows slept peacefully. Tomorrow was Thursday. Thatcher Wynne would come to her stand at exactly 7:45 and smile at her like he did every week. But now she knew the truth. He wasn't interested in her milk, or her company, or her smile. He was interested in her land, and all his charm was just a way to soften her up for the kill. Well, Rose Tilden wasn't going to be charmed or bullied into submission. If Thatcher Wynne wanted a fight, he was going to get one. The next morning, Rose was at her market stand earlier than usual. She arranged her milk bottles with special care and waited. When she saw the black Range Rover pull up, she straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. Thatcher walked toward her with his usual confident stride, but when he reached her stand, he paused. Something in her expression must have warned him. "Good morning, Rose," he said cautiously. "Mr. Wynne," she replied coldly. "I don't have any milk for you today." Confusion crossed his handsome face. "I'm sorry. Your employee, Mr. Morton, paid me a visit yesterday," Rose said, keeping her voice steady despite the anger building inside her. "He made it very clear what your real interest is." Thatcher's expression changed, and for a moment he looked genuinely puzzled. Then understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by what looked like genuine dismay. "Rose, I didn't send Morton to your home," he began. "Save it," she cut him off. "For months you've been coming here, pretending to be interested in my products, making small talk, while all along your company has been plotting to take my land. What was this, some kind of game to you? See if you could charm the simple farmer girl into selling." People at nearby stalls were starting to stare. Thatcher lowered his voice. "It's not like that. I had no idea Morton approached you yesterday. Please, can we talk about this somewhere private?" "There's nothing to talk about," Rose said firmly. "Your company can send all the offers it wants. My answer will always be no. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have customers to serve." Thatcher stood there for a moment, looking as if he wanted to say more. But then he nodded once, turned, and walked away. Rose watched him go, telling herself the pain in her chest was just anger, not disappointment. She'd been a fool to think someone like Thatcher Wynne could be interested in someone like her. Men with money and power only wanted more money and power. That was the way of the world. But as she handed a bottle of milk to her next customer, she couldn't help remembering the look in Thatcher's eyes just before he walked away. It hadn't looked like the frustration of a businessman denied a deal. It had looked, just for a moment, like genuine hurt. The days following Rose's confrontation with Thatcher at the market were quiet. Too quiet. She kept expecting more representatives from Wynne Development to show up at her door with increased offers and thinly veiled threats. But no one came. Thatcher didn't return to the market either. Rose told herself she was relieved, but each time she heard a car pull up near her stall, she couldn't help looking up expectantly. By the following Thursday, she had to admit to herself that she missed him, or at least she missed the man she'd thought he was. "No sign of your admirer today?" Sam asked as he helped Rose load her unsold bottles back into her truck at the end of the market day. "He's not my admirer," Rose replied firmly. "And good riddance. The last thing I need is a wolf in sheep's clothing hanging around my stand." Sam raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that? Because you've been checking the parking lot every 5 minutes all morning." Rose felt her cheeks grow warm. "I have not. I was just keeping an eye out for customers." "Uh-huh," Sam said, unconvinced. "Well, whatever happened between you two, I hope it works out. That man might be rich, but he always treated you with respect. That counts for something in my book." Rose drove home with Sam's words echoing in her mind. Had Thatcher treated her with respect? He'd been unfailingly polite, always paying full price for his milk when others tried to haggle, never pushing for more conversation than she was willing to give. But all the while, his company had been planning to take her land. When she pulled into her driveway, Rose was startled to see Thatcher himself leaning against his Range Rover, parked on the side of the road just beyond her property line. He straightened when he saw her truck, but made no move to approach until she'd stopped and stepped out. "What are you doing here?" Rose demanded, her hand still on the truck door. Thatcher took a cautious step forward. I came to apologize and to explain. You deserve that much. Rose crossed her arms over her chest. I'm listening. I didn't know Morton came to see you, Thatcher said, his eyes earnest. I didn't authorize it. In fact, I specifically instructed everyone at the company to leave your property off any acquisition lists. Rose's brow furrowed. Why would you do that? Thatcher looked down, suddenly seeming less like the powerful businessman and more like a schoolboy caught passing notes. Because I knew how much this place meant to you. I could see it in the way you talked about your cows, the pride you took in your milk. This isn't just a piece of land to you, it's your home. So you admit, you were interested in my property? Rose pressed. Initially, yes, Thatcher admitted. When I first started coming to the market, it was to scope out the area. The Meadowbrook development has been in planning for years. But then I met you and... He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. And... What? Rose prompted. And I started coming for you, he said simply. For those few minutes twice a week when I could just be a regular person buying milk from a woman who didn't care about my last name or bank account. You treated me like anyone else, and that was refreshing. Rose wanted to believe him. Part of her already did, but the practical side of her couldn't ignore the facts. Then explain Morton, explain how he knew about my mother's condition. Thatcher's expression darkened. I'm going to find out exactly how that happened. Morton reports to my brother Gregory. He runs the development side of Wynn Enterprises, and he's been pushing hard to complete Meadowbrook. He must have authorized the approach without consulting me. Your own brother went behind your back? Rose asked skeptically. It wouldn't be. The first time, Thatcher said with a grimace. Gregory and I have different priorities. He sees the bottom line, I see the community. A weak meow interrupted their conversation. A small orange cat emerged from under Rose's porch, rubbing against her ankles. When did you get a cat? Thatcher asked, momentarily distracted. I didn't, Rose said, bending to pet the thin animal. He showed up a few days ago. I've been leaving food out, but he's still pretty skittish. Thatcher knelt slowly, extending his hand to the cat, who cautiously approached to sniff his fingers. He likes you, Rose observed, surprised. Animals are good judges of character, Thatcher said, looking up at her with a small smile. At least that's what my grandmother used to say. The moment stretched between them, strangely intimate. Then the cottage door opened, and Mrs. Wilson poked her head out. Rose, is everything all right? She called, eyeing Thatcher with suspicion. Everything's fine, Mrs. Wilson, Rose assured her. Mr. Wynn was just leaving. Thatcher rose to his feet, brushing off his knees. Actually, I was hoping I could talk to you a bit longer. Maybe show you something that might help explain. Rose hesitated, torn between caution and curiosity. Mrs. Wilson, could you stay with Mama a little longer? I won't be gone more than an hour. After Mrs. Wilson reluctantly agreed, Rose found herself sitting in the passenger seat of Thatcher's luxury SUV, feeling distinctly out of place among the leather and technology. Where are we going? She asked as they pulled away from her cottage. To show you what Meadowbrook is really about, Thatcher replied cryptically. They drove for about 20 minutes, heading toward the outskirts of town where most of the Wynn properties were located. But instead of turning toward the sleek office buildings or upscale housing developments, Thatcher took a dirt road Rose had never noticed before. They emerged into a clearing where construction was underway. Workers in hard hats moved about, operating machinery and carrying materials. But this didn't look like the start of luxury condos or a shopping center. What is this place? Rose asked, as Thatcher parked and came around to open her door. This, he said with unmistakable pride, is going to be the Maple Hollow Agricultural Center, community gardens, educational facilities for sustainable farming practices, and a year-round farmers market. Rose stared at him in disbelief. You're building a farmers market? But why? Because not everything has to be about luxury homes and profit margins, Thatcher said as they walked toward a large wooden structure taking shape. My grandfather was a farmer before he became a developer. He never forgot where he came from, and he taught me that the land is only valuable if it serves the people who live on it. He showed her the plans, pointing out areas for workshops, spaces for local vendors, and even a small dairy processing facility that would be available for small producers like her. "This is part of Meadowbrook?" Rose asked, still trying to process what she was seeing. Thatcher nodded. "The sustainable heart of it. Yes, there will be housing, affordable housing, not luxury estates, and some commercial space. But this center is what I've been fighting for, what Gregory and the board keep trying to scale back or eliminate entirely." As they walked around the site, Thatcher greeted workers by name, asking about their families and listening with genuine interest to their updates on the construction progress. Rose watched him, seeing a side of Thatcher Wynne she hadn't known existed. "Why are you showing me all this?" she finally asked, as they stood looking out over what would become the community gardens. Thatcher turned to face her, his expression serious. "Because I want you to know who I really am, not who you think I am. And because your land is not and never will be part of Meadowbrook, as long as I have any say in the matter." Rose wanted to believe him. The sincerity in his eyes made her heart beat faster. But years of struggling alone had taught her to be cautious. "What about your brother? What about your board? You said yourself they have different priorities." "Let me worry about them," Thatcher said firmly. "Your land is yours, Rose, I give you my word." On the drive back to her cottage, Rose was quiet, processing everything she'd seen and heard. Thatcher seemed content to let her think, occasionally, pointing out landmarks or sharing brief stories about the area's history. When they pulled up to her cottage, Rose noticed another car in her driveway, an expensive sedan she didn't recognize. "Expecting company?" Thatcher asked, frowning. "No," Rose said, a knot forming in her stomach. "Mrs. Wilson drives an old station wagon." They got out of the SUV and approached the cottage cautiously. Before they reached the porch, the front door opened and a tall, thin man in an expensive suit stepped out. He looked so much like Thatcher that Rose knew immediately who he was. "Gregory," Thatcher said, his voice suddenly cold. "What are you doing here?" Gregory Wynne's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Hello, brother. I was just having a fascinating chat with Miss Tilden's mother. Charming woman, if a bit confused about certain details, like who actually owns this property." Rose pushed past both men and hurried into the cottage. Mrs. Wilson was sitting on the sofa looking distressed, while Martha Tilden sat in her rocking chair by the window, smiling vaguely. "Mama, are you all right?" Rose asked, kneeling beside her mother. "Such a nice young man," Martha said dreamily. "He knew your father, said he's going to help us with the farm." "Mrs. Tilden seems to think her late husband still owns this land," Gregory said from the doorway, where Thatcher stood glaring at him. "But according to county records, ownership transferred to her after his death. And given her current mental state, there might be grounds to challenge her competency to manage the property, or to transfer it to you, for that matter." "Get out," Rose said, her voice shaking with anger. "Get out of my house right now." "Of course," Gregory said smoothly. "I was just leaving, but do consider our offer carefully, Miss Tilden. The legal battles over property when mental competency is in question can be quite lengthy and expensive. I'd hate to see you drain what little resources you have, fighting a losing battle." As Gregory brushed past Thatcher, his brother grabbed his arm. "This stops now," Thatcher said, his voice low and dangerous. "Or so help me, Greg, I will make you regret it." Gregory pulled his arm free. "Always the white knight, aren't you, Thatch? But the board meeting is next week, and I've got the votes. Your little pet project at Meadowbrook is going to be scaled back to make room for what actually makes money. And this property," he glanced back at the cottage, "will be part of phase 2, one way or another." After Gregory left, Thatcher found Rose in the kitchen, her hands gripping the edge of the sink so tightly her knuckles were white. "Rose, I'm so sorry," he began. "Did you know?" she asked without turning around. "Did you know he would come here and threaten my mother?" "No," Thatcher said firmly. "I would never allow that. Gregory he doesn't see people, only opportunities and obstacles, but I promise you he won't get away with this." Rose finally turned to face him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "How can you promise that? He said he has the board votes. He said he could challenge Mama's competency." "He's bluffing about the legal challenges," Thatcher assured her. "As long as you have power of attorney for your mother, her competency isn't grounds to force a property sale." "And the board votes?" Thatcher's expression hardened. Let me handle the board. Wynn Enterprises is still my company, even if Gregory sometimes forgets that fact. Rose shook her head, suddenly exhausted. I don't know what to believe anymore. This morning, I thought you were the enemy. Then you showed me Meadowbrook and I started to think maybe, just maybe, you were different from other rich men who only want more. Now your brother is threatening my mother and you're talking about board votes and power of attorney. Rose, Thatcher said, stepping closer but stopping when she backed away. I know this is overwhelming, but please believe that I never wanted any of this to happen. I care about you. I have from the first morning I saw you at that market stand, with your gingham cloth and your handwritten labels. The sincerity in his voice made Rose's heart ache. But the day's events had left her emotionally drained and unsure who to trust. I think you should go, she said quietly. I need time to think and I need to make sure Mama is okay after Gregory's visit. Thatcher nodded, respecting her decision, even though disappointment was clear on his face. I understand. But Rose, whatever. You decide about me, don't let Gregory intimidate you. This is your home and no one can take it from you against your will. After Thatcher left, Rose sat with her mother, who had already forgotten Gregory's visit and was happily telling stories about Rose's childhood, mixing up details and timeline, but beaming with love for her daughter. Mrs. Wilson had gone home, clearly shaken by the confrontation. That night, Rose couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the day's events in her mind. Thatcher's earnest explanations, the agricultural center under construction, Gregory's thinly veiled threats. Could she trust Thatcher? Was he truly different from his brother? Or were they just two sides of the same coin, both determined to get what they wanted by whatever means necessary? As dawn broke, Rose made her decision. She would go to the market as usual. If Thatcher came, she would hear him out one more time. But she would not give up her land. Not for threats, not for money, and not for the growing feelings she couldn't quite deny were taking root in her heart. Market day dawned bright and clear. Rose went through her morning routine mechanically, her mind elsewhere as she milked the cows and filled the glass bottles. The orange cat who had taken up residence under her porch watched from a safe distance, eventually accepting the saucer of milk she set down for him. At least you're easy to please, Rose murmured, watching the cat lap eagerly at the milk. Just food and a dry place to sleep. No complicated feelings, no family drama. The cat blinked at her with intelligent eyes, as if to say he understood, more than she gave him credit for. At the market, Rose set up her stand with less enthusiasm than usual. She kept glancing at her watch as 7:45 approached, unsure whether she wanted Thatcher to appear or not. Part of her longed to see him, to continue their conversation from yesterday. Another part feared that trusting him would only lead to heartbreak. At exactly 7:45, a black Range Rover pulled into the parking area. Rose's heart jumped, but it wasn't Thatcher who stepped out. It was a young woman in a tailored suit who approached. Rose's stand with purpose. Ms. Tilden, the woman asked, her voice crisp and professional. I'm Vanessa Carter, Mr. Wynn's executive assistant. He asked me to deliver this to you. She handed Rose a sealed envelope and a small cardboard box. Before Rose could respond, Vanessa added, he also wanted me to tell you that he respects your need for space and time to think. He won't pressure you, but he hopes you'll read what he wrote. After Vanessa left, Rose stared at the envelope in her hands. Her name was written on the front in a bold masculine script. She tucked it into her apron pocket, deciding to read it later when she wasn't surrounded by curious neighbors. The small box, however, proved more difficult to ignore. It wasn't wrapped like a gift, just a plain cardboard container sealed with tape. Curiosity won out, and Rose carefully opened it. Inside was a carved wooden sign about the size of her hand. It read, Tilden Family Farm in beautifully carved letters, with small images of cows etched into the corners. It was rustic, yet elegant, the kind of sign that would look perfect hanging above her market stand. Well, that's mighty pretty, Sam commented, peering over from his vegetable stand. From your admirer, I take it? Rose nodded, running her fingers over the smooth wood. It's handmade. Did you know Thatcher Wynn made things like this? Sam chuckled. Honey, that man wouldn't know a whittling knife if it bit him on the backside, but I bet he knows people who do. The question is, why is he giving you gifts when you're supposed to be mad at him? It's complicated, Rose said with a sigh. The rest of the market day passed in a blur. Rose made her sales on autopilot, all the while feeling the weight of Thatcher's letter in her pocket. By the time she packed up to leave, her curiosity had become unbearable. Sitting in her truck before driving home, she carefully opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. Dear Rose, I know words are cheap, especially from a man whose family built its fortune on promises that weren't always kept. But I'm hoping you'll give me one more chance to explain myself and my intentions. The agricultural center I showed you yesterday isn't just a project, it's my vision for what Maple Hollow could be. A place where small farmers like you aren't pushed out by development, but celebrated and supported. Gregory and the board see it as a waste of resources, a sentimental folly. But I believe it's the heart and soul of what Meadowbrook should be. My grandfather used to say that land was only worth what it gave back to the community. I've tried to honor that philosophy, even when it puts me at odds with my own family. Gregory believes in profit above all else. I believe in people. Your land was never part of the Meadowbrook plans, not the official ones anyway. I made sure of that from the beginning, long before I knew you. But Gregory has always had his own agenda. He sees your property as the final piece in a puzzle he's determined to complete, regardless of who gets hurt in the process. The board meeting is next, Tuesday. Gregory is planning to propose a revised plan for Meadowbrook that would scale back the agricultural center and add your property to the acquisition list. I'm going to fight him with everything I have, but I want to be honest with you. It won't be easy. He spent months building alliances on the board. Whatever happens, I give you my word that I will protect your home, even if it means using my personal resources rather than the company's. I'm sorry for the pain my family has caused you. You and your mother deserve better. The sign I've enclosed is a small token of my respect for what you've built. It was made by Tom Lewis, the carpenter who's building the market stalls at the center. I told him about your family farm, and he created this as a tribute to your heritage. I won't come to the market unless you want to see me, but if you're willing to talk again, I'll be at the agricultural center tomorrow morning at sunrise. I go there most days to watch the progress before the workers arrive. It's peaceful then, just the birds and the promise of what's to come. Yours. Thatcher Rose folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. Her emotions were a tangled mess, hope, fear, longing, and caution all competing for dominance. She drove home slowly, trying to sort through her feelings. When she arrived, Mrs. Wilson was waiting on the porch, looking worried. What's wrong? Rose asked, immediately concerned about her mother. Your mother's fine, Mrs. Wilson assured her. She's having a good day, actually. But that Morton fellow from Wind Development came by again. I told him you weren't home and he couldn't come in, but he left this. She handed Rose another envelope, this one bearing the Wind Development logo. Inside was a formal letter outlining a new purchase offer for her property, significantly higher than the previous one, along with thinly veiled references to potential legal challenges regarding her mother's competency. Rose crumpled the letter in her fist. The nerve of these people, she fumed. There's more, Mrs. Wilson said hesitantly. Dr. Patterson called while you were out. Your mother's test results came back, and he wants to discuss treatment options. He said it's not urgent, but he'd like to see you both next week. The weight of it all suddenly felt crushing. Her mother's declining health, the farm's financial struggles, the pressure from Wind Development, her confusing feelings for Thatcher. It was all too much. Thank you for staying with her, Rose said, trying to keep her voice steady. I can. Take it from here. After Mrs. Wilson left, Rose found her mother in the garden, contentedly pulling weeds from around her beloved roses. It was one of the few activities Martha still did with confidence, her hands remembering what her mind sometimes forgot. Mama, how are you feeling today? Rose asked, kneeling beside her. Martha smiled, her face lighting up with recognition. Rose, my Rose, I was just thinking about you. Did you have a good day at the market? It was a lucid moment, a gift that Rose had learned to treasure. Yes, Mama, and look what someone gave me. She showed her mother the wooden sign. Martha's fingers traced the carved letters of their family name. It's beautiful. Your father would have loved this." "Mama," Rose said carefully, "do you remember Dr. Patterson calling about your test results?" Martha's smile dimmed slightly. "Yes, dear, something about new medications. But don't you worry about that now. Some things are meant to be and we can't change them. But if there's a treatment that could help slow it down maybe," Martha interrupted with surprising clarity. "Not stop it. I'm not afraid, Rose. I've had a good life. My only worry is leaving you alone with all of this." She gestured, vaguely at the small farm around them. "I'm not alone, Mama. I have friends, neighbors who care." Martha patted her daughter's hand. "And that young man who's sweet on you? The one who gives you those special looks at the market?" Rose blushed. "You know about Thatcher? Mrs. Wilson gossips," Martha said with a wink. "And I may be forgetful, but I'm not blind. Is he the one who gave you this sign?" Rose nodded, reluctant to share the complications of her relationship with Thatcher. He's different from what I thought at first." "People usually are," Martha said wisely. "Your father wasn't what I expected either. I thought he was just a rough farm boy with dirt under his fingernails. Turned out he had the gentlest heart of anyone I'd ever known." They sat together in the garden until the sun began to set, Martha drifting between clear memories and confused ones, but always with that underlying wisdom that illness couldn't take away. That night, after getting her mother settled in bed, Rose sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and both letters in front of her, Thatcher's heartfelt explanation and Morton's corporate threats. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. She thought about the agricultural centre, about Thatcher's vision for a place that celebrated small farmers instead of pushing them out. She thought about Gregory's cold eyes as he threatened her mother. And she thought about the board meeting on Tuesday that might decide the fate of both the centre and her home. The orange cat had somehow slipped into the house and now jumped onto the empty chair across from her. Regarding her with those knowing eyes, "What would you do?" she asked the cat, who merely blinked slowly in response. "I could just sell the place, take the money and move Mama somewhere with proper care. Part of me thinks that would be the sensible thing to do." The cat let out a disapproving meow. "You're right," Rose sighed. "This place is more than land and buildings. It's our history, our heart. Selling would be like cutting out a piece of ourselves." She picked up Thatcher's letter again, rereading his invitation to meet him at the agricultural centre at sunrise. Did she dare to trust him, to believe that he was different from his brother and genuinely cared about her? Morning came too quickly. Rose had barely slept, but she'd made her decision. After completing her milking and setting up the bottles to chill, she left a note for Mrs. Wilson, explaining that she'd be back before her mother woke up, and drove to the construction site Thatcher had shown her. The sky was just beginning to lighten when she arrived, painting the horizon in shades of pink and gold. The construction site was quiet, the machinery still, no workers yet in sight. Rose parked next to the familiar Range Rover and stepped out into the cool morning air. She found Thatcher standing on what would eventually be the porch of the main building, watching the sunrise. He seemed lost in thought, unaware of her presence, until she spoke. "It's beautiful here in the morning," she said softly. He turned, surprise and hope lighting his features. "You came." "I got your letter," Rose said, climbing the temporary wooden steps to join him on the platform. "And the sign. It's lovely." "Tom's a true craftsman," Thatcher said. He understood what I was trying to express. They stood side by side, watching as the first rays of sunlight touched the framework of what would become the market hall. "You really believe in this place, don't you?" Rose asked. "It's not just for show." "It's the most important project I've ever undertaken," Thatcher confirmed. "Not because of what it will cost or what it might earn, but because of what it represents. A connection to the land, to the people who work it, to the community that depends on it." "Morton came by my house again yesterday," Rose said, watching Thatcher's reaction carefully, "with another offer and more veiled threats about my mother's competency." Anger flashed in Thatcher's eyes. "I'll deal with Morton and Gregory. This has gone far enough." "What will happen at the board meeting on Tuesday?" Rose asked. Thatcher turned to face her fully. "Honestly, it's going to be a fight. Gregory has been lobbying the board members for months, convincing them that my vision for Meadowbrook isn't profitable enough. He wants to cut the agricultural centre in half and use the rest of the land for high-end retail. And my property? He'll try to add it to the acquisition list, claiming it's necessary for Phase 2. If he succeeds, the company would authorize him to pursue it by any means necessary, including legal action. Rose shivered despite the warming air. Can he really challenge my mother's right to decide what happens to our land? He can try, Thatcher said grimly. But I won't let it get that far. I've been making some calls, reaching out to board members who still remember my grandfather's vision for the company. I think I can sway enough votes to block Gregory's proposal. And if you can't, Thatcher's expression was resolute, then I'll use my personal shares to veto it. It would create a serious rift in the company, maybe even force a restructuring of leadership, but I'd do it in a heartbeat. Why? Rose asked, the question that had been burning in her mind for days. Why would you risk your position, your relationship, with your brother for this project, for my farm? Thatcher took a deep breath as if gathering courage. Because some things matter more than business. Some people matter more. He looked into her eyes. You matter more, Rose. From that first morning at the market, when you treated me like a regular person instead of a win, something changed in me. I started to see Maple Hollow through your eyes. Not as land to be developed, but as a community to be cherished. Rose's heart pounded in her chest. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Thatcher assured her. I'm not expecting anything from you. I just want you to know that whatever happens with Gregory, with the board, with Meadowbrook, your home is safe. I'll make sure of it. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. In that moment, Rose made her decision. She wouldn't run from her feelings anymore. I believe you, she said simply, and I want to help. If there's anything I can do to stop Gregory's plans, just tell me. Relief and something deeper washed over Thatcher's face. Hesitantly, he reached for her hand. When she didn't pull away, he entwined his fingers with hers. Just knowing you trust me is more than enough, he said softly. They stood together, hand in hand, watching as the sun rose fully over what would someday be a place where farmers like Rose could thrive. For the first time in months, Rose felt a sense of hope, not just for her farm, but for her future. What neither of them knew was that at that very moment, Gregory Wynne was meeting with James Morton in his office, plotting a strategy that would threaten everything they were fighting for. My brother thinks he can outmaneuver me at the board meeting, Gregory was saying, his voice cold with determination. But he's forgotten one important detail, the trust our father set up. If we can prove that Martha Tilden is incompetent to manage her affairs, the probate court could appoint a conservator. And with the right influence, that conservator could be persuaded to sell the property. Morton looked uncomfortable. That seems extreme and potentially damaging to our public image if word got out. Gregory waved away his concerns. Sometimes, progress requires difficult decisions. The Tilden property is the key to making Meadowbrook the premier development in the region. I won't let my brother's sentimentality or his infatuation with some milkmaid stand in the way. He pulled a file from his desk drawer. I've already spoken with Judge Reynolds. He owes me a favor, and he's agreed to fast-track a competency hearing. All we need is evidence that Martha Tilden is unable to make sound decisions regarding her property. And how do we get that? Morton asked. Gregory smiled thinly. That's where you come in. I need you to visit Dr. Patterson at Maple Hollow Medical Center. Find out exactly what's in Martha Tilden's medical records. Patient confidentiality won't be an issue. I've had our legal team prepare the necessary documents. As Morton reluctantly agreed to the plan, he had no idea that their conversation was being overheard. Vanessa Carter, Thatcher's executive assistant, had come to deliver some paperwork and stopped outside Gregory's office when she heard Rose Tilden's name mentioned. Now she quietly backed away, already reaching for her phone to call her boss. The battle for Rose's home and for the soul of Wynne Enterprises was about to begin in earnest. The next few days passed in a whirlwind for Rose. After her sunrise, meeting with Thatcher at the Agricultural Center, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had agreed to work together to stop Gregory's plans, though neither was quite sure how. Sunday morning, Rose was surprised to see Thatcher's Range Rover pull up to her cottage. Even more surprising was what he was wearing. Faded jeans, a worn flannel shirt, and work boots that actually looked like they'd seen some dirt. "What are you doing here?" she asked as he climbed out of his vehicle, followed by Vanessa, his assistant, who was similarly dressed down. "I brought reinforcements," Thatcher said, gesturing to the back of his SUV where several toolboxes and bags of supplies were visible. "Vanessa overheard something concerning at the office yesterday. We need to talk, but first, I thought maybe we could help with some of those repairs you've been putting off." Rose was momentarily speechless. "You want to help fix my farm? If you'll let us," Thatcher said, suddenly looking uncertain. "I'm not as useless with tools as Sam seems to think. My grandfather made sure I knew how to work with my hands before he let me near the company books." Vanessa stepped forward. "And I grew up on a farm in Iowa. I know my way around repairs." She glanced at the cottage's sagging porch steps. "Those look like they need replacing." After a moment of hesitation, Rose nodded. "I've been meaning to fix those for months, and the barn roof has a leak over the feed storage." "Perfect," Thatcher said, rolling up his sleeves. "Point us in the right direction, and we'll get started." While Martha watched curiously from her rocking chair by the window, Thatcher and Vanessa unloaded their supplies. Rose introduced them to her mother, who was having one of her good days and seemed delighted by the unexpected company. "Such nice friends you have, Rose," Martha said, her eyes twinkling. "And that young man is even more handsome up close." "Mama," Rose whispered, embarrassed, but Thatcher just smiled warmly at Martha. "Your daughter is pretty special, Mrs. Tilden," he said. "She's taught me a lot about what really matters." As Thatcher and Vanessa got to work on the porch steps, Vanessa explained what she had overheard outside Gregory's office. "He's planning to challenge your mother's competency in court," she said quietly, hammering a nail into a new stepboard. "He's trying to get access to her medical records to use as evidence." Rose felt sick. "Can he do that?" "Not legally," Thatcher said grimly, "but Gregory has friends in positions of power, including apparently Judge Reynolds." "What can we do?" Rose asked, panic rising in her throat. "First, we make sure your mother's medical records stay private," Thatcher said. "Vanessa has already called Dr. Patterson to warn him about potential unauthorized requests for information. He's agreed to be extra vigilant." "And second," Vanessa added, "we gather our own evidence for the board meeting. Gregory's been hiding his plans from most of the board members. If they knew what he was trying to do, how he was trying to do it, they wouldn't support him," Thatcher finished. "Most of them, anyway." They worked through the morning, Thatcher and Vanessa replacing the porch steps while Rose made lunch for everyone. Martha joined them on the newly repaired porch, telling stories about the farm's history that were surprisingly clear and detailed. "Your father planted that oak tree the day you were born," she told Rose, pointing to the massive tree at the edge of the pasture. "Said it would grow strong and tall, just like his daughter would." After lunch, they moved on to the barn roof. Rose climbed up with Thatcher while Vanessa stayed with Martha, who had taken an immediate liking to the young woman. The roof working side by side to replace damaged shingles, Rose finally asked the question that had been on her mind all morning. "Why are you doing all this? You could have just called to warn me about Gregory's plans." Thatcher paused, a roofing nail between his teeth. He removed it and answered honestly, "Because I wanted to show you who I really am. Not the businessman in the expensive clothes who buys milk at your stand, but the man underneath all that. The man who knows the value of hard work and keeping promises." Rose felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun beating down on them. "I think I'm starting to see that man pretty clearly." Their eyes met, and for a moment, Rose thought he might kiss her. But then, the sound of a car engine broke the spell. They both looked down to see Dr. Patterson's sedan pulling into the driveway. Rose quickly climbed down the ladder, worry replacing the warm feelings of moments before. Dr. Patterson rarely made house calls anymore, except in emergencies. "Doctor Patterson, is everything all right?" she asked as the elderly physician stepped out of his car. Fine, he assured her, though his expression was serious. "I just thought I should deliver this in person, given the circumstances." He handed Rose a thick envelope. "It's your mother's complete medical file, copies of everything we have. After Miss Carter's call yesterday, I thought you should have these for safekeeping." Rose felt tears spring to her eyes. "Thank you. I've known your family for 30 years, Dr. Patterson said gravely. Your mother's condition is between her, you, and her medical team. No one else has any right to that information without proper authorization." After the doctor left, Rose opened the envelope and looked through the papers with Thatcher at her side. The medical terminology was complex, but the diagnosis was clear. Martha had early-stage dementia that was progressing slowly, but steadily. "She has good days and bad days," Rose said softly. "Sometimes she knows exactly who and where she is. Other times she thinks Dad is still alive, or that I'm still a little girl." Thatcher placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "My grandmother had dementia toward the end of her life. I know how hard it can be, watching someone you love slip away a little at a time." Rose leaned into his touch, drawing strength from his presence. "I'm so afraid of Gregory using this against her, making her seem incompetent when she still has so much wisdom and love to give." "We won't let that happen," Thatcher promised. "In fact, I have an idea." Monday morning, instead of going to the market, Rose found herself sitting in a lawyer's office in the next town over. The attorney, Ellen Wright, was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s whom Thatcher had recommended. "These power of attorney documents are in order," Ellen said, reviewing the papers Rose had brought. "Your mother signed them when she was of sound mind, giving you full authority to make decisions regarding her care and property. But will that be enough if Gregory challenges her competency?" Rose asked. Ellen smiled confidently. "With the documentation we've prepared today, absolutely. We've updated everything, added medical directives, and created a trust for the property that names you as trustee. Your mother may have moments of confusion, but Dr. Patterson's assessment clearly states that she has periods of lucidity during which she can express her wishes regarding her care and property. And those wishes are that Rose maintain ownership of the farm," Thatcher added. "That's been clearly documented now." Ellen nodded. "Mr. Wynn's brother would have an extremely difficult time challenging this in court. And if he tried, it would take months, if not years, long past the point where it would be useful for his development plans." Relief washed over Rose. At least her mother and their home were protected legally, but there was still the board meeting tomorrow to worry about. "What about Meadowbrook?" she asked Thatcher as they left the lawyer's office. "Even if Gregory can't get my land, he can still gut your agricultural center, can't he?" Thatcher's expression was determined. "Not if I can help it. I've been making calls all weekend. I think I've secured enough votes to block his proposal, but it's going to be close." "I wish I could be there," Rose said, "to speak about what the center would mean for small farmers like me." Thatcher's eyes lit up. "Why can't you?" "What do you mean?" "Come to the meeting. Speak to the board directly. Let them see the face of the community they'd be supporting or betraying." Rose hesitated. "Would they even listen to me?" "They'd have to," Thatcher said. "According to company bylaws, community stakeholders have the right to address the board on matters directly affecting their livelihoods. You qualify." For the first time, Rose felt a spark of hope that they might actually win this fight. "Then I'll be there." "What time?" 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, Thatcher said. "Wear whatever makes you feel confident. These people respect authenticity." The next morning, Rose stood outside the imposing Wynn Enterprises headquarters in her best dress, a simple blue sundress she normally saved for church, with a small basket of her products in hand. She'd spent the previous evening preparing, with help from Mrs. Wilson, who stayed with Martha. Thatcher met her in the lobby, looking every inch the corporate CEO in his tailored suit. But his smile when he saw her was warm and personal. "You look beautiful," he said. "And more importantly, you look like yourself." "I'm nervous," Rose admitted as they rode the elevator to the top floor. "Just speak from the heart," Thatcher advised. "These people deal with numbers and projections all day. What they need to hear is the human side of what we're trying to build." The boardroom was intimidating, all dark wood and leather chairs surrounding a massive table. A dozen men and women in expensive suits were already seated, along with Gregory, who looked shocked to see Rose enter with his brother. "What is she doing here?" he demanded as Thatcher guided Rose to a seat near the head of the table. Ms. Tilden is here as a community stakeholder, Thatcher replied calmly. She has the right to address matters concerning Meadowbrook. The chairwoman, an elegant older woman named Patricia Wynne, Thatcher and Gregory's aunt, called the meeting to order. We have a full agenda today, she announced. But first, I understand we have a community representative with us. Ms. Tilden, would you like to speak now? Rose stood, clutching her basket for courage. Thank you for allowing me to be here. I'm Rose Tilden, a small dairy farmer from Maple Hollow. My family has worked our land for 3 generations. She placed her basket on the table and began removing items. A bottle of milk, a jar of hand-churned butter, a small round of cheese. These are products from my farm. Not mass-produced, not processed, but made with care and knowledge passed down through generations. There was a time when most of the food in this region came from small farms like mine. Now, most of them are gone, replaced by housing developments and shopping centers. She looked at each board member in turn. I'm not against progress, but I believe real progress preserves what's valuable while building something new alongside it. That's what Thatcher's Agricultural Center represents, a future where development and farming can coexist, where small producers like me can thrive alongside new businesses. Gregory interrupted. This is all very charming, but the fact remains that the Agricultural Center reduces Meadowbrook's projected profit margin by nearly 15%. We have a responsibility to our shareholders. We also have a responsibility to the community, Thatcher cut in. A commitment my grandfather made when he founded this company, which is written into our corporate charter, Rose continued, her voice growing stronger. I know that Mr. Gregory Wynne has been trying to add my property to the Meadowbrook plans. He's even threatened to challenge my mother's competency in court to force a sale. Murmurs of surprise and concern rippled through the board members. Gregory's face darkened with anger. That's a serious accusation, Patricia Wynne said, frowning at her nephew. I have evidence, Vanessa spoke up from her position near the door, holding up a small recording device. Mr. Gregory Wynne instructed James Morton to obtain Mrs. Tilden's medical records through improper channels and to arrange a fast-tracked competency hearing with Judge Reynolds, with whom he claims to have an arrangement. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. Several board members looked openly disgusted. Patricia Wynne's expression was thunderous. Is this true, Gregory? She demanded. Gregory's face had gone pale. This is a misunderstanding. I was merely exploring all legal options to complete the development as efficiently as possible. There is nothing legal about what you proposed, Thatcher said coldly, and nothing ethical about using an elderly woman's health condition to steal her property. Patricia turned to the board. I believe we need to reconsider the leadership of the Meadowbrook project. I move that Thatcher be given full authority over its development, according to his original vision, including the Agricultural Center, at its currently planned scale. The vote was swift and decisive. Gregory stormed out of the room as soon as it was clear he had lost, not just the vote, but likely much of his influence within the company. As the meeting concluded, board members came up to examine Rose's products, asking questions about her farm and methods. Several expressed interest in visiting the Agricultural Center once it was completed. You were magnificent, Thatcher told her as they left the building together. I don't think I've ever seen the board so moved. We did it, Rose said, still stunned by their victory. We actually did it. We did, Thatcher agreed. The center will be built as planned and your farm is safe. Gregory has been reassigned to our West Coast office effective immediately. He won't bother you again. Rose felt light, as if a weight she'd carried for months had finally been lifted. What happens now? Now, Thatcher said, taking her hand, we celebrate, and then we get back to work. The center won't build itself, and I believe I still have some repairs to finish at your farm. 6 months later, Rose stood behind her new stall at the grand opening of the Maple Hollow Agricultural Center. The spacious, light-filled market hall was filled with vendors, farmers, bakers, craftspeople, all from the local community. Her display of milk bottles, cheese, and butter was arranged under the handmade wooden sign Thatcher had given her, now expanded to read, Tilden Family Farm, Milk and Honey. The name change had been Martha's idea, inspired by the honey produced from the beehives Thatcher had helped Rose set up behind her barn. On good days, Martha enjoyed tending the lavender plants that attracted the bees, while the orange cat, now officially named Marmalade, kept her company. Rose watched as Thatcher moved through the market, greeting vendors and customers alike. Unlike his brother, he remembered everyone's names, asked about their families, and took genuine interest in their products. He was still the CEO of Wynn Enterprises, still wore expensive suits to board meetings, but here, in jeans and a simple, button-down shirt, he was just Thatcher, the man who had helped rebuild her porch steps and her faith in people. He caught her eye across the crowded market and smiled, that special smile he reserved just for her. In the months since their victory at the board meeting, their relationship had blossomed slowly but steadily. Thatcher came to dinner at the cottage twice a week, sometimes bringing work from the office, but more often bringing tools for another repair project. He and Martha had developed a sweet bond, with Thatcher patiently listening to her stories, even when they meandered or repeated. As the day's grand opening festivities continued, Thatcher made his way back to Rose's stall. "How's business?" he asked, leaning against the counter. "Wonderful," Rose replied. "I've already sold out of the special batch of honey butter, and 3 restaurants have placed standing orders for weekly milk deliveries." "I knew you'd be a hit," Thatcher said proudly. "You're the heart of this place, Rose. You always have been." Their moment was interrupted by Patricia Wynne, who approached, with an elegant older man Rose didn't recognize. "Rose, dear, I'd like you to meet someone," Patricia said. "This is Charles Abernathy, an old friend of the Wynne family and a specialist in historical property preservation." "Miss Tilden," Charles said, shaking her hand warmly. "I've heard so much about you and your farm. Patricia tells me it's one of the oldest continuously operating family farms in the county." 4 generations now, Rose confirmed. "Though it's just my mother and me these days. That's precisely why I'm here," Charles explained. "I represent the Heritage Farmland Trust. We provide grants to historic family farms for preservation, modernization, and educational programs. Your property would be an ideal candidate." Rose looked at Thatcher in surprise. He smiled encouragingly. It was Aunt Patricia's idea. The trust could help with repairs, equipment upgrades, even hire assistants so you're not doing everything alone. And there would be no risk to your ownership, Charles assured her. The grants come with no strings attached, except that the land remain in agricultural use, which I understand is your intention anyway. As Charles explained more about the program, Rose felt tears prick her eyes. After years of struggle, trying to keep the farm afloat on her own, help was finally coming from unexpected directions. Later that evening, after the market had closed and the opening day celebrations were winding down, Thatcher walked Rose back to her truck. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything, the center, the trust connection, all of it." "I didn't do it alone," Thatcher reminded her. "You fought just as hard. We make a good team." In the fading light of sunset, with the new agricultural center behind them and the promise of a secure future ahead, Rose finally gave in to what her heart had known for months. She leaned up and kissed Thatcher, softly at first, then with growing confidence as his arms circled her waist. "I love you," she whispered, when they finally broke apart. "The real you, not the CEO or the Wynne heir, but the man who fixes barn roofs and reads poetry to my mother and believes in places like this." "I love you too," Thatcher replied, his voice husky with emotion. "I think I have since that first morning, at your market stand, when you treated me like just another customer instead of someone to impress." Their moment of happiness was interrupted by the sound of a car approaching, an unfamiliar sedan that parked nearby. A woman stepped out, smartly dressed and carrying a briefcase. She looked around until she spotted Rose, then walked directly toward them. "Rose Tilden?" the woman asked, her expression professionally neutral. "Yes," Rose replied, reluctantly stepping back from Thatcher's embrace. "My name is Eleanor Mitchell. I'm an attorney." She glanced at Thatcher, seeming to recognize him. "Mr. Wynne, I didn't expect to find you here as well, but it's convenient since this concerns your family too, in a way." "What's this about?" Thatcher asked, his arm still protectively around Rose's waist. Eleanor opened her briefcase and removed a folder. "I represent the estate of Margaret Tilden Williams. She passed away last month in Arizona. Rose frowned. I don't know anyone by that name. She was your father's cousin, Eleanor explained. According to our research, they had a falling out before you were born and lost touch completely. However, in her will, she specifically named you as her heir. Her heir? Rose repeated, confused. But I never even met her. Nevertheless, she left you everything, Eleanor said, handing Rose the folder, including a rather substantial portfolio. Serve investments and... She paused, looking directly at Thatcher. Approximately 5% of Wynn Enterprises' outstanding shares purchased by her late husband in the company's early days. Rose and Thatcher stared at the lawyer in shock. That would make Rose one of the largest individual shareholders outside the Wynn family, Thatcher said slowly. Eleanor nodded. Precisely. The paperwork is all here, along with Mrs. Williams' personal effects and a letter she wrote to you before. Her passing, she apparently kept track of your family from afar all these years. When she learned of your father's death and your mother's illness, she decided to make amends in the only way she could. As the lawyer continued explaining the details of the inheritance, Rose felt as if she were in a dream. Not only was her farm secure, but now she had the resources to provide the best care for her mother and to expand the dairy operation as she'd always dreamed, and those shares in Wynn Enterprises. She looked at Thatcher, who was grinning widely. Looks like you'll be attending a lot more board meetings, he said, as an investor this time. Is that going to be a problem? Rose asked. Me owning part of your company? Thatcher laughed and pulled her close. Are you kidding? It's perfect. Now Gregory can never try to undermine the agricultural center again, not with you having a say in company decisions. After Eleanor left, promising to return the next day to go through the paperwork, in detail, Rose and Thatcher stood in the twilight, still processing the unexpected turn of events. It's like something out of a soap opera, Rose said, shaking her head in disbelief. Secret relatives, surprise inheritances, and the milk girl and the millionaire falling in love, Thatcher added, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Don't forget that part. How could I, Rose said, smiling up at him. It's my favorite part of the story. As they walked hand in hand toward the old oak tree that Rose's father had planted on the day she was born, the future stretched before them. Not perfect, not without challenges, but full of promise and possibility. The little dairy farm would continue, stronger than ever. The agricultural center would thrive, bringing new life to small farms throughout the valley. And Rose and Thatcher would build something together that neither could have imagined alone. Under the spreading branches of the oak, with the scent of honey and wildflowers in the air, Thatcher took both of Rose's hands in his. You know, they say the best stories don't end, they just find a new beginning. Is that what this is? Rose asked. A new beginning? For the farm, for the center, for us, yes, Thatcher said, but only if you want it to be. Rose's answer was written in her smile and in the promise of tomorrow's sunrise when once again she would rise with the dawn to milk her cows, bottle her Tilden family farm milk, and begin another day in the life she had fought so hard to preserve, a life now enriched by unexpected blessings and a love as sweet as honey.